Welcome back to Studio Chatter. Does your marriage need a bit of a reset? Well, get ready for a better love relationship. Let's welcome Sharla and Robert Snow from Master Your Marriage. Welcome.
Thanks, guys.
The month of love. To be talking about marriage. This is so great.
Perfect. We should talk about marriage on the month of love.
Perfect.
We should.
Tell us a little, Tell us a little bit about yourself. See this great marriage we've got.
This is good, yeah. So Sharla and I, we've been married 31 years.
31. Congratulations.
And you would think that it's been all bliss. Like everybody's like, oh, you guys are talking about marriage. It's all bliss, but it hasn't been all bliss. We both were raised in divorced homes. And so we had a lot of patterns that we needed to relearn. And then it sort of just came to us. We're watching our friends, as I'm sure a lot of you have, we're watching our friends' marriages just like blow up. And we're like, what is going on? And then some of our other friends are just in marriages where they're just like, yeah, she ignores me. And it's sort of just this loveless thing, right? And so our mission really is, can we bring back romance and happiness and love, teach these marriages some skills? And one of those skills really is, can we have constructive disagreements? Because if we can strengthen marriages, happy marriages, strengthen the family, stronger children, stronger communities. And there's research from 2018 that actually says that in absentee father homes, you have a higher chance of poverty, higher chance of drug abuse, higher chance of babies out of wedlock, higher chance of going to prison. And can we strengthen the marriage now so that we can maybe prevent some of those downstream things? And that's really where we are.
Okay. It hasn't always been perfect for us. Like Robert said, we came from some chaos in our homes, and his mom was married more than once. My parents were divorced when I was about 10. I grew up with a single mom most of my childhood. And so, like Robert said, we had a lot to learn and unlearn, and I felt like we were doing so great on that. And early on in our, years and years ago, there was this point where
I remember
we were we were driving in a car one night, and we were really at the height of our career and raising kids and just so busy, kind of going in opposite directions. But we sat in the car one day, and I asked Robert, I said, just got a question. Can you remember a time, like an actual specific time, when you felt deeply loved by me?
Oh boy, that's
a great question. That is scary.
And
Yes.
Yeah.
Scary. Vulnerable.
The car was dead silent, and he thought, and he thought, and he thought, and it felt like 30 minutes later, and I'm like, oh gosh, something is off. Like, even though we've worked on some of those patterns that we grew up with, like we were going in different directions. And so marriage isn't, what we'd like to really tell people is that it's small and simple things that create the biggest impact. It's not, we really don't believe it's hard. It's just doing the right actions, action steps consistently.
And sometimes I've noticed it's when I least want to do it, but that's sometimes when it's most important to just take that one act. I remember last night I did something like that, and it was so impactful, and it was something so small, but it's what he had asked, and I was like, hey, yeah, I did have a little bit of dinner, and I did the dishes, and it was just so impactful. It was such a small act, but I was like, that was really important to him, and I had been disregarding that was an importance for us, right?
Yeah.
Because I was too busy.
Yeah. We always say it's the small and simple things.
Yeah, like Jordan Peterson actually has a great quote, and he's a clinical psychologist, but he says your marriage is strengthened, your relationships is strengthened in the small moments. It's over the dinner table, over the breakfast table, how you say hello, how you say goodbye, what are these, we call these things rituals, just the small rituals, and when you do those, and we know the small things add up to being big things. It's not the once a year vacation.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are nice. Hey, I'm not arguing, but
but they come and go.
Yeah,
really
they come
quickly.
and go. And if you can get in a pattern of learning how to connect, really learning how to connect and create these rituals that you just do, then you're speaking each other's unconscious love language and learning
give
that
us
as
a few
well.
tools. Like that we can work on in our marriages.
Yes,
because of course we're blissful and super happy, but
some of our viewers may want to know more.
Absolutely.
They want to know.
Absolutely, that's the case. Yeah.
Well, let us tell you just a little tiny bit about some of the marriage research, because it's quite fascinating. Up until only a couple decades ago, there was no marriage research. There was nothing to really tell us what are the skill sets that we need to be happy in our relationship. Until John Gottman came along, if you've heard of Gottman marriage. Okay, so tell them a little bit about the research that he did.
oh geez, the Love Lab?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, he took newlyweds and he stuck them in this, they called it the Love Lab. It was like an Airbnb. And, you know, he'd put heart rate monitors on them and watched them on the camera, and they just watched them for 24 hours. And they had some predictive information come from this, and one of it really was this thing we call bids for connections. And the one story really was like, oh, she's looking out the window and she says, oh, look at the tree, you know, or look at the boat out there. And if the partner was like, yeah, that looks nice, right? So he missed that opportunity for connection. Or he said, oh, that looks really nice. That's midway. Those couples actually did really well. The ones that
So
mastered
simple.
it,
Simple, but
the ones that mastered it were the one where he came over and he was like, oh, look at that.
We should get one of those.
We should get one of those, right? And
Even if you're not going to, right?
yeah,
Just
and it's-
connecting with what's important
at
to them.
6 years, he brought the couples back, and he was able
who
to.
was married, who was
Yeah,
divorced.
Yeah, who was living unhappily.
Wow.
And guess what?
And it
The
was-
ones that had been responding to those bids for connection, the amount of times that they had responded to those bids was 84%. The ones that were divorced, they had only responded like 36% of
Yeah,
the time
36%.
they were responding to those bids for connection. So that was a predictor for whether or not a couple was actually going to stay together. And some of the other, he came up with 8 predictors, and he was able to actually predict by watching a conflict conversation with a couple within 10 minutes of watching them interact whether or not they would get divorced or if they would stay together. And he had
94%.
with about 94% accuracy.
Okay.
And one of the biggest things.
What are those?
Yeah, here we go.
So there's 8, and we only have time to make one of the biggest thing, and there were 8 predictors, but one of the things was called the 4 horsemen, and he called them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And those were criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And of those 4, contempt was the number 1. It is the biggest killer of
Can you
relationships.
explain what
Yeah.
that looks like in a
So
marriage?
criticism and contempt oftentimes go hand in hand, and criticism is when you're making a value judgment about the other
Yeah.
person. It's usually those universal quantifiers like you always and you never and you're so lazy. But when you add contempt to it, it's where I'm speaking from a place of superiority and I'm looking down on you. And it
Oh.
usually has a feel of disgust.
Oh.
Why are you always doing that? With that, it just sometimes it's just the facial.
That's a hard face too.
It's the
Does that face look familiar?
not anymore.
Not anymore.
Totally kidding. Don't answer that.
Not anymore.
But I will tell you that was the number 1 pattern that I learned in childhood growing up.
Oh.
That was the number 1 thing that I had to break because it was destroying our relationship. So I know how to recover from
wow.
that. I know how those childhood experiences impacts our relationships. One of the biggest things we see 75 to 80% of the time, these patterns are established in childhood because that's how we learn. We learn by watching those first relationships. Were our parents loving towards one another? Were they cold? Did they allow us to express our own emotions and our own needs?
Okay.
So the contempt piece was, I was really a pro at it. I was really, really good at
wow.
it.
Yeah.
And just one day,
Well, I think we
he's
get
like,
comfortable with each other, and then that person becomes like kind of the stomping grounds
Yeah.
for some of our emotions, and it may not be directed at them, but yet it's directed at them. They get all the bad.
well, that's the
Because
interesting.
we're comfortable.
So we
I
call
guess.
them triggers, right? We get triggered by our partner, we get triggered by our spouses, but our triggers are never actually
Our spouse.
Our spouse.
Oh,
They
interesting.
are maybe the relationship we had before, or they go back to early in childhood, and physiologically our body just responds because we have these trigger buttons that were put in early on, and we just react. So one of the other pieces he found out in his research was that when we go into this state of fight or flight, when we go into, he called it diffused physiological arousal, that was another indicator when couples were constantly in that state, that was a big indicator of divorce. And again, that's those trigger buttons being activated from these past experiences.
Okay.
So you got to
Okay.
work through those then.
You do.
So are you marriage therapists, or are you just experts in your field wanting to help others?
So an NLP is neuro-linguistic
Okay.
programming, and I'm a trainer of neuro-linguistic programming, and we've also gone through the Gottman training program.
Oh.
And so we use Gottman training, their methods in our own methods that we've created. So we've combined NLP and Gottman coaching methods
So
together.
you see couples.
We do. We do workshops, we do retreats, we do online coaching, we do personal, private coaching. And we're actually launching a podcast that's going to be at the end
Tell
of
us
the
about
month.
that a little bit.
It's going to be launching at the end of the month. It's called Master Your Marriage.
Okay.
And we're going to tell all of our stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, and it's going to be
Start from the
vulnerable
beginning.
and real. And we're going to start at the beginning, and we're going to tell you all and how we overcame a lot of those things.
Awesome. But for now, this month, we could go to your website and find out, like, do we want some coaching in our marriage or some tips?
It's masteryourmarriagepodcast.com.
Okay.
And you can get all the information and actually give us your email address. We'll let you know when the first podcast launches so you can get notified when it first hits. And also if you want to look into some of the other offerings that we have, you can see it there as well.
Okay.
And there's some tools. There's a workbook and
There are some free tools and videos and downloads and
Okay.
yeah.
If you left us today with one tip, what do you think it would be?
Each of you, just one little tidbit.
You want to go? I already know.
First, go, you go.
I think it's important to establish those moments of connection,
Okay.
right? And learning not just what you think your partner loves, but really what their true unconscious love language is. So, and it's not nice, but I can touch her right here, right? And this brings a sense of calm. So when I come home, every time I come home, I hug her from behind and kiss her on the back of her neck.
Oh.
And she might melt, but that's every single time I come home, I do that.
But you have to learn what that thing
I was
is
going to
for
say,
your
because you
partner.
probably also couldn't tell him that was it.
You'll have to have us back and we'll teach you how to find out.
We'll teach you how to find out.
Yes, you have to come back. You have to
Sharla,
come
what's your
back.
tip?
Tidbit, yes.
I think it's similar, just that it really is the small things. I want people
Okay.
to take away the fact that it is actually much easier than you think, and it's predictable, and anyone can have an incredibly fulfilling relationship.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank you.
both.
Good advice.
giving
Thank you
us hope.
so much.
Happy for having us.
Happy
This was so fun.
Valentine's
Come back another time. There's more studio chatter coming up.